I'm not ashamed.
How was it that Moses was saved from being killed as a baby? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Exodus on walking through the Bible.
His word, the glory of his cross.
If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to Exodus chapter 2. We're going to be reading from verses 1 to 10. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Exodus chapter 2, beginning at verse 1. And a man of the house of Levi went and took as a wife a daughter of Levi. So the woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was a beautiful child, she hid him 3 months. But when she could no longer hide him, she took an ark of bulrushes for him, daubed it with asphalt and pitch, put the child in it, and laid it in the reeds by the river's bank. And his sister stood afar off to know what would be done to him. Then the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, and her maidens walked along the river side. And when she saw the ark among the reeds, she sent her maid to get it. And when she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby wept. So she had compassion on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call a nurse for you from the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for you?" And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." So the maiden went and called the child's mother. Then Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed him. And the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. So she called his name Moses, saying, "Because I drew him out of the water." At the end of chapter 1, we have Pharaoh issuing a command that all of the male children from the Hebrews that were born were to be thrown into the river, but every daughter was to be kept alive. So in chapter 2, we find a man of the house of Levi marrying a daughter of the house of Levi. If it weren't for the presence of other scripture, the names of those two people would be unknown to us. However, in Exodus 6, verse 20, we read, "Now Amram took himself Jochebed, his father's sister, as a wife, and she bore him Aaron and Moses. And the years of the life of Amram were 137. So Moses' father's name was Amram, and his mother's name was Jochebed, Jochebed being Amram's aunt. Amram was a Levite, an important point to remember for later on in the book. When Moses was born, under the Pharaoh's edict, he should have been thrown into the river. However, this command was an evil command, so according to Hebrews 11:23, by faith they hid him for 3 months because he was a beautiful child. His beauty could have been seen as a sign of God's approval, and because they were not afraid of the king's command. These parents should be commended for their actions. Pharaoh's command, as we just said, was evil, and so the easy thing to do would have been to kill the child, but they didn't. They had faith in God, in that whether they lived or died, the will of the Lord would be done. I'm sure they prayed that the Lord would protect them and the child, but regardless, they weren't going to sin by murdering the child at the king's command, and instead, they hid him for 3 months. However, you can only hide a child for so long, so in order to save him, they built an ark of bulrushes, a small basket, to put the child in. If you recall, Noah was saved by God in an ark, and here Moses is saved in a similar but smaller version of an ark. This ark, it was said to be made of bulrushes, which would be papyrus, a kind of bulrush which was very common in ancient Egypt. It would have had a stalk about the thickness of a finger, which could grow to a height of 10 feet. And as such, this material was well suited to make a light-weighted boat. In order to keep the boat together and prevent it from sinking, Jochebed fastened the bulrushes together with asphalt, slime from the Nile, and covered it with pitch, which would serve as to waterproof it. Having done this, she put the child in it and placed him in the reeds by the riverbank. Placing him here would serve as a protection to the child, for it would prevent the boat from floating perilously downstream, instead allowing it to be discovered by someone who passed by. Moses' sister, almost certainly Miriam, who we will meet later, stood afar off in order to know what happened. How old Miriam is here, we're not told, nor are we told her age anywhere else in the Bible, but it is fairly safe to assume that she is anywhere from 6 to 10 years old here, for if she was much younger than that, then she wouldn't really be able to do what this passage said she did. While the child was in the river, lo and behold, Pharaoh's daughter came to bathe in the river, a common practice in Egypt at the time. She found the child crying. She asked her maids to go get the child and bring him to her. Upon looking at him, she recognized that he was one of the Hebrew children. How did she know this? We're not entirely sure, but perhaps it was because he would have been circumcised, a practice that went all the way back to Abraham that served as a sign of God's covenant between him and Abraham. It was also a physical sign that would differentiate them from the Gentiles around them, which would include the Egyptians. If this is the reason, it would be intriguing. But regardless, she recognized the child as a Hebrew. The passage said that Pharaoh's daughter had compassion on him, a common emotion that women have for children, even those that are not their own. Miriam, who had obviously moved closer in order to hear the conversation, asked Pharaoh's daughter if she wanted her to go get one of the Hebrew women to come and nurse the child for her, since it would not have been custom for someone of this status to nurse the child herself. Pharaoh's daughter agreed, and Jochebed was brought to nurse the child. Pharaoh's daughter agreed to pay Jochebed for this service, and once the child was old enough to be weaned, he was brought to Pharaoh's daughter to be raised by her. She called his name Moses, for he had been drawn out of the water. Moses was saved because of his parents' faith in God and God's providence in protecting this child in Pharaoh's house. For as we'll see, God would have a purpose for Moses. How great and wonderful is the God that we serve. With that, our time is up for today. Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Exodus chapter 2, verses 11 to 15, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
I'm not ashamed.
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.
Of his cross.